We have, for the last several weeks, had the distinct privilege here at Shabbat Night Live during our question and answer period to have Nehemia Gordon, a Hebrew scholar, a real Hebrew scholar, from the land of Israel with us. And last week we touched on a very heart-wrenching situation in which a man and woman were married in an official ceremony, not by the state, had that they were going to do in just a couple of months, but he died 5 days later, and the child, which she is now bearing, the church people in her area were literally calling her a whore because she didn't get married with a piece of paper, and of course that makes her child a bastard, in their eyes, not biblically. We handled that last week with our condolences for her as a widow, and condemning the harsh treatment of those biblical illiterates out there who have no idea what marriage is about. But we find that this goes across the board. I have Nehemia Gordon back here with us today because we have a letter that really is related to this, I'll read it. I'm not sure what to make of the first question. We really have two. It says, I don't know where to begin. I'll be blunt. If a judge orders me to voluntarily pay alimony and I refuse, is that being disobedient to the father? Well, I guess you went to the judge made a judgment, but if you voluntarily pay alimony, that means that it's up to you if you volunteer or not. I don't know how to handle that. That doesn't make any sense, but the next question is even more perplexing. Can I be forgiven of the sin of divorce? And of course, he is divorced, or the judge wouldn't have told him to voluntarily pay alimony if that's what the judge said. I'd check the papers real clear, because usually alimony is not a voluntary thing. It's usually an order, okay? But it says, can I be forgiven of the sin of divorce? As soon as I saw that, I thought, well, sin of divorce? What on God's green earth is he talking about? Nehemia, do you have any insight from the scripture what the sin of divorce is? I don't see that.
I missed that verse in the Torah. I don't know what he's talking about. Deuteronomy 24 talks about a sin related to divorce, but that's the sin there is the man divorces the woman, she marries a second man, divorces the second man, and goes back to the first man. That's the sin, going back to the first man.
Right. It actually describes remarriage.
Remarriage after being with a different man is then described. Here, let's read it. Let's read this, because I don't know how. It says, this is the New Revised Standard Version. It says, suppose a man enters into marriage with a woman, but she does not please him because he finds something objectionable about her, and so he writes her a certificate of divorce, but puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house. She then leaves his house and goes off to become another man's wife. Then suppose the second man dislikes her, writes her a bill of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house. So far, there's no sin. There's unfortunate situations, very sad.
Right.
This has happened.
And let's talk about that, because, concerning divorce, Yeshua said, Moses gave us divorce. Of course, Moses didn't give us anything. I mean, he gave us the revelation that came from heaven, and that's what it means. Moses gave us divorce because of hardness of heart. And when it all boils down to it, a lot of people have been through it, it's just hardness of heart on one party, on both parties, but somehow that love that once brought them together, hardness of heart developed, and, instead of living life in pure hell, with a complete jerk or a witch, depends on, the perspective of the person, the hardness of heart of where it's coming from. It's not a death sentence, because of hardness of heart. Okay, there is a way to end this, and then you can go on with life.
Now here's the key verse, Deuteronomy 24:4. Her first husband who sent her away is not permitted to take her again to be his wife after she has been defiled. For that, and the defiled is to be with another man.
That's right.
For him, not for the second husband, but for the first husband. For that would be abhorrent to YeHoVaH. So there is something that's an abomination is the word. There's something that's an abomination to YeHoVaH, but that's for a woman to go back to her first husband after being with another man. And the actual divorce itself and going to the second man, that's not abhorrent to YeHoVaH or an abomination. Now here's where people get confused. And it's the translation's fault, Michael. It's Malachi 2:16.
Okay, now before we go there, I want to state this, because I have friends, acquaintances, and some good friends that actually did this. They divorced, they both married other people, then years later they both came back together. Now, according to the Torah, you don't do that.
It's an abomination, it
right.
says.
They did that, but outside of their knowledge of the Torah. And so it's like, at this point, it's like, okay, all right, you didn't know, but, it's not like you throw the woman out on the street now because of this situation. Or do we have a...
I think what I tell everybody is work it out for yourself in fear and trembling with prayer and study before the Lord. To me, it's pretty clear what Deuteronomy 24:4 says. I'm sure they love each other, but there are people who love each other who by the Torah are not allowed to be together. Just because there's love doesn't mean that it's a permissible relationship in the Torah. There might be, can I be blunt here? There might be a brother and sister that love each other. It doesn't mean the Torah permits it. But I say work it out for yourself in fear and trembling and prayer and study before the Lord. It's very clear to me. Let's jump to Malachi 2:16.
Okay, all right.
Look, this is the stuff that got John the Baptist got his head cut off,
It did, it did.
I don't want my head cut off, so I'm going to
Okay.
say work it out for yourself.
All right.
Malachi 2:16.
Put the knife down. Seth, put the knife down. Put the knife down. Okay, go ahead, Nehemia.
If anyone starts dancing, I got to run, okay? Okay. That's the whole head on a platter thing. Anyway, Malachi 2:16. It says,
A head on the platter joke. Okay, all right.
כי שנא שלח אמר יהוה אלוהי ישראל וכיסה חמאס אל לבשו אמר יהוה צבאות ונשמרתם רוחכם ולא תבגודו. It's so clear there. I don't know why it couldn't have just been translated what it said. Here's how the JPS translates it. The Jewish translation, for I detest divorce, saith the Lord, the God of Israel. God hates divorce. New Revised Standard Version, second witness. For I hate divorce, says the Lord, the God of Israel. That's two witnesses, and they're both lying. It's clear in the Hebrew what it says. In the Hebrew it says, for he hated to divorce, says YeHoVaH, the God of Israel. Who's the he? Read the previous verse. The he is the man who has cheated on his wife. So it's describing a situation here where the man can't stand this woman, his wife, and decides, I'm just going to go cheat on her. I don't need to get divorced. It's humiliating to get divorced. It's socially unacceptable to get divorced. There are consequences to getting divorced with my kids and dealing with stuff. I'm just going to go have a girlfriend. Why should I get divorced? That's what Malachi 2:16 is talking about. A man who, instead of living up to his responsibility, which may be to take care of his wife, or it might be to get divorced, he said, no, I hate divorce.
And even in divorce, there is a legal requirement to take care of his wife. According to the get, according to the agreement that is made.
You have to give a certificate, a sefer kritut, or a certificate of divorce. And look, in the Jewish culture, you don't send a woman away empty-handed. You don't kick her out on the street and let her fend for herself. You're expected to, give her something and then, part ways, and then she can go and do whatever she wants. But you can't leave her in a limbo state where she's not married and unable to marry, because technically she still is married. In Judaism, that's called an agunah, which means a chained woman. And this is actually a huge problem in modern Israel, which recognizes there is no such thing as civil divorce in Israel. There's religious divorce, which is a get, a certificate of divorce, a document that's written and handed to the woman. The man has to give it to her, and there's men who refuse, and there are women who have been going decades unable to get remarried. They're stuck in this state of limbo because the man, it's humiliating for him. He doesn't want to get divorced. He hates being divorced, so he keeps this woman in this bondage. That's really what agunah is, a woman in bondage. And this reality that Malachi was talking about 2,400 years ago exists today in the modern state of Israel, and it's an evil thing. And this is what it's talking about here. Not that YeHoVaH hates divorce, but this person who hates divorce is just not being a mensch, a decent human being.
Okay.
So
well,
that's my take on it.
And where we get into in Matthew and the Gospels and dealing with this very thing, so many of these things are so twisted and distorted because the whole thing starts out that Yeshua says, don't even think that I've come to destroy the Torah or the prophets. Absolutely not. And then he goes right on down the line and says, the scribes and the Pharisees say this, I say that. He is interpreting the Torah, and we have to understand what the scribes and Pharisees were teaching concerning divorce at that time, and the parameters for this, that Yeshua is standing up against and saying, no, you can't do this. What they were doing as far as making oaths and swearing by this and by that, instead of swearing in the name of YeHoVaH and saying, well, it really doesn't count. I can cheat people if I do this. See, outside of the context of the culture, there are things that are written in Matthew in the Sermon on the Mount where he's saying the scribes and Pharisees, the religious leaders who have added to and subtracted from the Torah, say this. I'm saying no. You obey Moses. This is what Moses says to do. Now I'm going to tell you the correct understanding of that. But we have so twisted Yeshua's words according to our Gentile perspective. That's why we end up with people saying, you know, can I be forgiven of the sin of divorce? It doesn't exist. There is no such thing. Sin is the violation of the Torah. Here is the man who knows the Torah. Is there anything in the Torah that calls divorce a sin?
Absolutely not. Not in the Tanakh.
There it is. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have. Join us again next week. You've got more questions from your cyberspace.
I do.
Okay, we'll be back next week. Here's a message for you out there. Thank you.